On March 19, 2025, something happened inside the French National Assembly that received almost no coverage in the English-speaking world. A formal parliamentary working group convened its first hearing on unidentified aerospace phenomena, bringing together scientists, military officials, and technical experts under the institutional authority of the Assemblée Nationale. This wasn't a cable news panel. It wasn't a whistleblower going rogue. It was a structured, methodical, government-initiated inquiry, the kind France has been quietly building toward for nearly 50 years, and it may represent the most consequential institutional approach to UAP investigation now underway anywhere on Earth. To understand why this matters, you need to understand that France doesn't treat UAP as fringe. It never has. In 1977, the French space agency CNES established GAPON, the first government-funded scientific body anywhere dedicated to studying unidentified aerospace phenomena. That program evolved into SEPRA in 1988, then into GAPON in 2005, which remains active today and publicly hosts its case database online. France has maintained continuous institutionalized UAP research for 48 years. No other nation comes close. Then there's the COMETA Report, published in 1999 by a group of senior French military officers, aerospace engineers, and scientists, including former heads of GAPON. It concluded that the extraterrestrial hypothesis was the most likely explanation for a subset of cases. The report was delivered directly to the French president and prime minister. Agree or disagree with its conclusions, COMETA demonstrated something remarkable. Elite French defense and scientific figures were willing to attach their names to serious UAP analysis, decades before the U.S. had its 2017 New York Times moment. The March 2025 hearing was organized under an existing parliamentary study group, the Groupe d'études on UAP, chaired by Deputy Christophe Blanchet. French parliamentary study groups occupy a specific institutional niche. They lack subpoena power and cannot compel testimony, but they can convene expert panels, produce formal reports, issue recommendations to ministries, and critically, request information from government agencies under parliamentary oversight authority. The hearing reportedly included testimony from representatives of GAPON, members of France's defense and intelligence establishment, and independent scientists with relevant expertise. According to French UAP researchers who attended or monitored the proceedings, the session focused on establishing the current state of data collection, identifying gaps in France's detection infrastructure, and evaluating whether existing institutional frameworks are adequate for the scope of the phenomenon. Compare this to the American model. The U.S.
approach to UAP disclosure has been driven overwhelmingly by whistleblowers, David Grush, Ryan Graves, David Fravor, testifying before Congress in high-profile televised hearings. These moments generate enormous public attention. They also generate enormous political friction. Congressional hearings in the U.S. are adversarial by design. Members use their 5-minute question windows for political positioning. Key claims go unverified in real time. The result is spectacle that moves public opinion, but often fails to produce durable, peer-reviewable findings. The French approach inverts this. It starts with the data infrastructure, JIEPN's standardized reporting system, its partnerships with the Gendarmerie Nationale and civil aviation authorities, and asks what that infrastructure is telling us. The question isn't who's covering this up, it's what are we measuring, and are we measuring it well enough? This distinction matters more than it might seem. JIEPN classifies cases on a scale from A, fully identified, to D, unexplained after thorough analysis. As of 2024, approximately 3 to 4% of cases in their database remain classified as D. That's a small percentage, but it represents hundreds of cases subjected to genuine scientific methodology. When a French parliamentary group examines these findings, it's working from a foundation of cataloged, analyzed, peer-accessible data, not anecdotal testimony alone. This is what institutional memory looks like. The U.S. established ARO in 2022 and has already cycled through leadership changes and credibility disputes. France has maintained continuous data collection for nearly 5 decades. The critical question is what this parliamentary activity can actually produce. Based on precedent and the structure of French governance, several outcomes are plausible. The study group could issue a formal rapport, a public report with specific recommendations to the Ministry of Armed Forces or the Ministry of Higher Education and Research. It could recommend expanding JIEPN's budget, mandate, or censor capabilities. It could propose creating a dedicated military reporting channel separate from JIEPN's civilian framework. It could also recommend French leadership in establishing a pan-European UAP data-sharing protocol, something that currently does not exist in any formalized way. What it almost certainly will not produce is the kind of dramatic, single-witness revelation that American audiences have come to expect, and that may be precisely the point. France isn't acting in isolation. In 2024, members of the European Parliament raised questions about UAP data coordination across EU member states. Ukraine's military has reportedly tracked anomalous objects in its airspace during the ongoing conflict, documented in a 2023 paper by Kyiv's main astronomical observatory. The Italian Senate held its own UAP-related discussions.
But France remains the only European nation with a mature, continuously operating scientific infrastructure for UAP study, and now active parliamentary engagement layered on top of it. If any country is positioned to move from data collection to formal policy conclusions, it's France. Not because of political will alone, but because the institutional plumbing already exists. There's a broader lesson here about what disclosure actually means. The American model treats it as a narrative, a story to be told with heroes, villains, and a dramatic arc. The French model treats it as a scientific and bureaucratic problem, one requiring better instruments, better protocols, and patient accumulation of evidence. Neither approach is inherently superior. Whistleblowers have forced open doors that institutional process alone never would have. But institutional process produces the kind of evidence that survives changes in political administration, media cycles, and public attention spans. The most likely path to genuine understanding of UAP, whatever they turn out to be, probably requires both: the drama of congressional testimony to force attention and the quiet discipline of systematic investigation to produce answers. France's National Assembly has taken a step that deserves far more attention than it has received, not because it promises immediate revelations, but because it represents something rarer and more valuable: an institutional commitment to treating the unknown with scientific seriousness, backed by parliamentary authority, and built on decades of accumulated data. The question now is whether this working group will produce a public report, and whether that report, when it comes, will be met with the seriousness it deserves. Because the answers to UAP won't come from a single hearing, a single whistleblower, or a single dramatic moment. They'll come from the slow, unglamorous, indispensable work of actually doing the science. France seems to understand that. The rest of the world should be paying attention.